Life is a process of becoming, a combination of states we have to go through. Where people fail is that they wish to select a state and remain in it. This is a kind of death. This quote from Anais Nin starts us off today talking about psychological flexibility and creativity. Welcome to the Modern Creative Woman podcast, exploring the art and science of creativity. And this is your podcast. It's for women like you who want to elevate their creativity and really start applying creative thinking in your everyday life. So I'm your hostess and creativity expert, Dr. Amy Backos. I'm a licensed psychologist and a registered and board-certified art therapist with almost 3 decades helping women with their creativity and authenticity. Here at the Modern Creative Woman, we are obsessed with helping you build your creativity. Through conversations and creative insights, I'll give you the science and the art of becoming the woman you've always wanted to be. Let's get started. Welcome in. I am in Paris and having the most amazing time. I stayed for a little bit in Montmartre at a hotel. Now I have a beautiful apartment with a little view of the Eiffel Tower. And I am midweek for the Modern Creative Woman Girl Boss Paris retreat, and it is incredible. I have quite a sweet tooth, and so French high tea is exactly the kind of food I love. We had high tea at the Ritz on Monday. Some of my favorite food. Keep checking in on my Instagram page at Dr. Amy Backos, and you can follow along the adventures as we are moving around Paris and learning how to truly focus on our presence, our mindset, our purpose. And we're also talking about rebranding ourselves over and over in life, that we recreate, reinvent. And as that quote from Anais Nin said, trying to stay in the same state of life is like a little bit of a death. Struggling too hard to remain where we are creates real difficulty, and we can get very stuck. In fact, the research shows that psychological flexibility is one of the most important qualities that we can embrace as we grow and as we become more and more of the person we want to be. In acceptance and commitment therapy, the focus and the goal and the end goal has always been psychological flexibility. Now, ACT is part of the vibrant third wave of behaviorism. And what that means in this new way of thinking of behavior, it's both the outward actions, such as what we're doing. Perhaps we're going for a walk or we're drinking a cup of coffee. It's also the inner experiences and contexts. So our behavior includes our inner experience, our thoughts, our feelings, our bodily sensations. And including the inner context is the reason that I believe ACT is so incredibly successful. Gone in psychology are those ideas that behavior is defined only by this external, observable reaction. And the modern way of thinking about behavior includes this inner experience and our private reactions. And it makes sense, right? It's often our inner experiences that we find so troubling. Those inner encounters are only observable to us, and they constitute this indispensable context to our lives. How we speak to ourselves, the ways that we tell ourselves what we can or should do. We are on this continually evolving basis, encountering these really non-public experiences, a set of thoughts and feelings that often came from so long ago. They were adaptive at one point, and yet they fail to take us to the next level where we want to go. And so by continuing to think the same thoughts, engage in the same behaviors, we really do get stuck, and it prevents us from self-actualizing and emerging in this uncovering kind of way as the woman we've always wanted to be. I think a lot about using our ongoing inner reactions and how we often use them to recreate a situation in our mind that looks like a past experience. We have something that happens on the outside and we respond internally. You probably can think of lots of examples of people who see the world as a terrible place, a dangerous place. And whatever they look at, that's what they see. You probably, hopefully, know lots of people who find the world a delightful and engaging and creative experience. So whatever they're looking at embodies that way of viewing the world. When describing creativity, it includes naturally the idea of being flexible, solving problems using different techniques, or really focusing in on different strategies and being able to use different strategies according to the situation in front of you. You might at times need to be open and curious, and at other times be critical and exacting. Creativity also includes a need for playfulness or even some outlandish ways of thinking. Creativity also leaves room for persistence and striving and extreme focus when necessary. When we are using our creativity at its best, we are able to adapt to the situation at hand, being psychologically flexible, and using the tools that we have and the strategies that will allow us to move forward, accomplish our goals, have fun. When we have freedom in our mind, it allows us to move towards what is possible and towards our dreams. Eleanor Roosevelt has a great quote on this: be flexible, but stick to your principles. In acceptance and commitment therapy, flexibility is about making contact more fully with the present moment and then making the behavioral changes to live in alignment with your chosen values. Here's what I mean. Making contact with the present moment constitutes having this mindful awareness of what's happening in the moment. And it means we're not trying to avoid, alter, or escape our experiences or our thoughts or our feelings. And I have to say, we all can struggle with psychological inflexibilities. Everyone has habitual reactions. Sometimes we over-rely on the same coping strategy, or we have a fear-based behavior that shows up in response to a reminder or an unwanted memory. This is how the brain works. When we move towards psychological flexibility, it doesn't mean we're completely void of these reactions. It means that we're able to deal with them as they arise. So instead of controlling our thoughts, we're responding flexibly to whatever shows up. And remember, I said your inner experience, your inner behavior is a thought, a feeling, a bodily sensation. There's a lot of those that emerge habitually that we can soften over time, of course. Yet the flexibility is in how we respond to what emerges. If we're startled, we're scared by something our child does, is our knee-jerk reaction to yell at them or scold them? Is it to retreat? Is it to hug them and tell them we were scared and we're glad they're home and safe? All of those are possible options to respond to fear that we're experiencing in the moment. When we move towards our values, we can choose our responses that are most in alignment with what we're going for. A loving parental relationship, in this case with a child, but all of our feelings and thoughts and bodily sensations that emerge deserve the opportunity for us to think creatively about how we really want to respond in the moment, instead of these knee-jerk reactions. When we're attempting to change our inner or outer unwanted experiences, we end up losing contact with the present moment, and we often respond rigidly to what's happening. Russ Harris says the greater your psychological flexibility, the better you can handle painful thoughts and feelings, and the more effectively you can take action to make your life rich and meaningful. We all strive to avoid discomfort. Think about the feeling of loneliness, and that's a discomfort that comes from our thoughts and our judgments about the feeling of loneliness. Remember, this is a universal human emotion, yet most of us take great pains to avoid feeling lonely. Loneliness can bring about feeling of sadness, loss, grief, fear, and when we're trying to avoid that feeling, it takes a lot of effort to change or somehow alter our present moment experience. It might be that we have a feeling in the pit of our stomach or a pain at our heart. We might have really uncomfortable thoughts like something is wrong with me, I'm unlovable, or worse. And our avoidance strategies can range from things that are mostly harmless to ones that are extremely maladaptive. One of the things that are more adaptive might be call a friend, play with a dog, make some art, go for a walk. And all of these are really pro-social. They constitute helpful and healing strategies. Nevertheless, they might be things we're doing to avoid the feeling of loneliness. There's other really maladaptive ways of dealing with uncomfortable emotion like loneliness. And it's when people really struggle to avoid, control, or escape those feelings that it gets us into trouble. It might be over shopping, scrolling through social media for longer than you intended, drinking alcohol, working too many hours. There's so many that you can probably think of. And it's behaviors that we do to avoid feeling bad. Now, the more adaptive kind of distractions or thought-stopping techniques have been suggested through traditional cognitive behavioral strategies. And these can be really helpful. And it does make us feel better. And a life of feeling good over time makes us feel better. So we might start painting or knitting. We might call a friend. I'm all about going for walks with women. You can walk your dog with a woman friend. There's so many things you can do to feel better in the moment. And the point is to link these to our values so we're flexible in moving towards what's important to us. Maybe what's important is feeling better and self-care and socializing. But we know the difference between avoiding a feeling by distracting ourselves versus going towards what's really important to us. Now, once we're willing to step off that treadmill of striving to avoid that present moment experience of discomfort, we can really start to exist in the here and now and accept what's happening. And that's a stance of willingness. We're willing to accept our present moment experience without exerting all these efforts to deny or avoid those inner private experiences. Now, I might dislike what's happening in the now, but accepting what's happening in the present moment is really the key to resolving any kind of painful issues and reducing our overall suffering. When we stop using avoidance and control strategies, we find new ways to relate to our thoughts, which can end this cycle of avoidance and control. And here is where creativity comes into play. When we establish our own willingness to cultivate a stance of acceptance, making contact with the present moment, and responding with all the options on the table instead of with a rigid set of inflexible rules, we feel better. We're engaged in our life. We begin enjoying things so much more. Remember, it's not about controlling our thoughts, our feelings, or our bodily sensations. It's changing how we respond to them, moving into a less judgmental stance about how we feel frees up so much psychic energy. And I think we just simply don't know how much psychic energy it takes to suppress our feelings and our thoughts and our worries until we finally stop doing it. Dealing with what is always takes less psychic energy than dealing with what is plus all of our avoidance strategies piled on top of it. There's some incredible early studies on trying to suppress our thoughts. And as early as the 90s, Dan Wagner showed that the frequency of the thought that you're trying not to think might go down for a little bit, but soon it happens more and more than ever. Any thought that we're trying to get rid of, any memory, which is just a certain type of thought that we're trying to avoid, a sadness, a fight, a childhood experience, that the effort to hold it down makes it more central to our thinking and even more likely to evoke a response. So those thought suppression strategies that were taught decades ago don't work. And in fact, they make the situation worse. For someone who experienced a trauma and they have a post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the criteria for that diagnosis is avoidance. They avoid anything that reminds them of the trauma they experienced. They'll avoid people, places, and things. They'll start to try and avoid the intrusive thoughts. That's another criteria. And they'll make great efforts to push away any thoughts that are about the trauma or related to the trauma. And what happens is everything becomes related to the trauma because it's constantly emerging in the brain, and the amount of psychic energy it takes to hold down that memory just bleeds into all the other areas of life. Suppressing your thoughts simply doesn't work. There's better and better strategies. And of course, we know that self-expression is the powerful alternative to suppressing our thoughts. Writing, making music, even looking at art, movement, dance, watching art, film, or the theater can give us an expression of our feelings. We have a cathartic experience when we watch a movie that gives us a lot of emotions. We get to go through that emotion. Even scary movies where we're startled or frightened serve a really important purpose in that we can feel frightened, but know that we're safe sitting on our couch watching a movie. The arts serve us in so many ways. It allows us to master our fears in some contexts. It allows us to have an expression. We can relate to a character in a painting or in a film. Better yet is our own expression. And the research shows over and over again that observing art is good for us, and making it is even better. I want to remind you, we don't make art to try and be good at it. We make art because it is good for us. It helps us, it heals, it soothes us. I'm going to say it one more time. We don't make art because we're good at it. We make it because it's good for us. And it's been good for us since the beginning of time. There's incredible art all around the world since the beginning of humankind. It's so relevant to us, not because it's great art, but because it's good for us. There's a quote by Stephen Hayes, who's the founder of acceptance and commitment therapy. And he says there's a tremendous irony in happiness. It comes from a root word meaning by chance or an occurrence, which in a positive sense connotates a sense of newness, wonder, and appreciation of chance occurrences. The irony is that people not only seek it, they try and hold on to it, and especially to avoid any sense of unhappiness. Unfortunately, these very control efforts can become heavy, planned, closed, rigid, and fixed. This is the same idea in the scientific terms as I mentioned at the beginning in Nin's quote about our failure when we try and hang on to certain states instead of fully experiencing all of our emotional and creative states. Psychological flexibility is really demonstrated in the science and in the art to give us those feelings that we truly are living our life or no longer avoiding. We become psychologically flexible. We respond in ways of our choosing, moving towards our values without rigidly applying fixed strategies in an effort to feel that one state of being, of happiness, for example. Have you ever tried to hang on to a state of happiness and realized that you couldn't? I think we all have. Certainly being on a holiday, we want to capture those memories. We take pictures. We tell stories about it later. We savor those happy moments. And yet realistically, we know that the balance comes when we're on holiday, resting, having fun, and then we're at home and we're working. That life is all of these states. There's pleasure in relationships, and there is pain and hurt as well. Holding on to only the pleasurable parts of life can lead to an imbalance in our emotional experience. Pushing away anything that feels uncomfortable ultimately leads to a lot of sadness. The thing we're trying to avoid comes bouncing right back to us. I hope you have a wonderful week being psychologically flexible, allowing whatever shows up to be there, and you can continue to respond according to your values, to what's important to you. And see if you can catch yourself responding in an automatic, habitual way and ask for a reset. You could say to someone, wait, let me restate that. I don't like how I said that. Let me try again. You could look in the mirror and say, wait, I just said something insulting. Let me back that up and say something more loving. Those automatic pathways will keep happening until we interrupt them a little bit, and we can engage more fully in our life when we become psychologically flexible, make contact with the present moment, and appreciate all of the things that are happening. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Now that you know about how to use your creativity, what will you create? Want more? Subscribe to the Modern Creative Woman digital magazine. It's absolutely free and it comes out once a month. And I know you can get a lot out of the podcast and the digital magazine. Yet when you're ready to take it to the next level, I want you to know you have options inside the membership. And if you're interested in a private consultation, please feel free to book a call with me. Even if you just have some questions, go ahead and book a call. My contact is in the show notes, and you can always message me on Instagram. Do come find me and the Modern Creative Woman on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Dr. Amy Bacos. If you like what you're hearing on the Modern Creative Woman podcast, I want to give you the scoop on how you can support the podcast. You can be an ambassador and share the podcast link with 3 of your friends. You can be a community supporter by leaving a 5-star review if you think it's worth the 5 stars. And you can become a gold star supporter for as little as $3 a month. All those links are in the show notes. Remember to grab your free copy of the 21-Day Gratitude Challenge. The link is in the show notes, and you can find it at moderncreativewoman.com. Have a wonderful week, and I cannot wait to talk with you in the next episode.